imaginative 9-year-old who loved to tell stories. She often invented elaborate tales involving her stuffed animals and imaginary friends. One day, she told her parents, John and Emily, that she had a twin sister at school named Clara. At first, her parents found it amusing and assumed it was just another one of Caroline's creative ideas. But as the days went by, Caroline continued to talk about Clara in increasing detail. John began to worry that this wasn't just a product of his daughter's imagination. Unlike Caroline's other imaginary friends, Clara seemed to be someone Caroline truly believed in. Every day, Caroline shared new stories about her twin, describing her as outgoing and mischievous, a stark contrast to her own more reserved nature. John tried to dismiss his concerns, but after Caroline brought home a drawing that she claimed Clara had helped her make, he couldn't ignore it any longer. The drawing featured two girls, each in a different drawing style. Carolyn proudly announced that she had drawn Clara and Clara had drawn her. This left John deeply unsettled. But before we dive into the story, make sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our exciting stories. John decided to investigate. Despite his wife's dismissive attitude, he began by observing Caroline during recess at her school, hoping to see this mysterious twin. At the playground, he saw Caroline being pushed on a swing by an older girl with long brown hair. The resemblance to Caroline was uncanny, but there was no clear explanation. Determined to uncover the truth, John reached out to Caroline's teacher via email. The reply was shocking. There was no girl named Clara in Caroline's class, and the teacher expressed concerns about Caroline's lack of social interaction with her classmates. John confronted his wife about his investigation, and she dismissed his concerns once again. However, John's worries only grew. He visited Caroline's school to meet with her teacher, who explained that while Caroline played alone in class, older children like the girl on the swing often helped her during recess. But as John left the school, he spotted something shocking: another girl who looked exactly like Caroline playing on the school grounds. John watched in disbelief as the girl, a near-perfect mirror image of Caroline, played on the playground. The resemblance was so striking that he couldn't just brush it off as a coincidence. As he watched, the girl got into a car with a man John assumed was her father. Unable to resist the urge to investigate further, John discreetly followed them. They drove across town, eventually arriving at a beautiful suburban neighborhood. The girl and her father got out of the car and walked into a well-kept house. John, his curiosity growing, parked a little down the street trying to remain unnoticed. He watched from his car, pretending to read a newspaper while observing the house. Something about the situation didn't sit right with him. As time passed, John's thoughts were interrupted when his phone buzzed. It was a message from his wife, Emily, asking where he was. She mentioned she had lost her car keys and would be staying at a friend's house for the night. The text left John feeling uneasy, but before he could fully process it, something else caught his attention. The father and daughter reappeared, sitting by the curb outside the house, chatting and watching the street. Then, out of nowhere, a car pulled up. John's stomach dropped. He recognized the car immediately. It was Emily's. His wife stepped out, greeted the girl with a warm hug, and kissed the man on the cheek. John sat frozen, his mind racing. How could this be happening? How was Emily connected to this family, and why had she been lying to him? Without thinking, John got out of his car and marched toward them, his heart pounding. Emily's face turned pale as she noticed him approaching. John's footsteps were heavy as he approached the trio, the weight of his discovery sinking in. Emily looked stunned, her expression a mix of guilt and shock. The man beside her, sensing something was wrong, stepped forward protectively, trying to defuse the situation. "John, what are you doing here?" Emily stammered, her voice shaky. "I could ask you the same thing, Emily," John replied, his voice filled with anger and disbelief. He turned to the man. "Who are you?" The man looked confused, glancing between John and Emily. "I'm Tom," he said cautiously. "Who are you?" John's heart pounded as he responded, "I'm her husband. Who are you to her?" The color drained from Tom's face as he turned to Emily, realizing the gravity of the situation. Emily stood frozen, her eyes welling up with tears, unable to find the words to explain. John continued, now addressing Tom directly. "We've been married for 15 years and we have a daughter together. Caroline, who's 9, has been talking about a girl named Clara at school. I'm guessing that's your daughter?" John gestured toward the little girl who was watching the scene unfold from the doorway. Tom slowly nodded, still processing what was happening. "Yes, that's Clara. And she's been mentioning a girl named Caroline, too." John's eyes narrowed as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Emily, seeing no way out, broke down in tears. "It's true," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been living a lie. I've been with both of you for years. And I couldn't keep it hidden anymore." Tom, looking devastated, stepped away from Emily, shaking his head in disbelief. John, overwhelmed with emotion, stared at his wife, trying to understand how this had all happened. "You've been lying to me this entire time?" John asked, his voice cracking. "Caroline, she's been talking about her twin sister, and it turns out you've been living a double life?" Emily nodded, unable to speak through her tears. The truth had come out, and it was far worse than John had ever imagined. John stood there, his heart pounding, trying to grasp the enormity of what he had just learned. He looked at Emily, searching for answers, but all he saw was guilt and shame. Clara, the girl Caroline had been talking about for weeks, wasn't a figment of her imagination at all. She was real, a part of a secret life his wife had been living. "How long?" John asked quietly, his voice filled with hurt. "How long have you been lying to me?" Emily wiped her tears and hesitated before answering. "For years," she finally admitted, her voice breaking. "Tom and I, we've been together for over 20 years. We have Clara together, and I've been going back and forth between you two. I told Tom I had a remote job that kept me away, and I told you the same. But the truth is, I was spending my time with both of you, leading 2 lives. I didn't think it would ever catch up to me, but now—" Her voice trailed off, unable to finish. John couldn't believe what he was hearing. Everything he had known his entire life with Emily had been a lie. His hands clenched into fists, not out of anger but out of the overwhelming pain. His mind raced, thinking about Caroline, their life together, and how this betrayal had affected everything. Tom, still processing the shocking news, spoke up. "You've been with both of us this entire time?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "How could you do this, Emily? And what about our daughter?" Emily sobbed harder, realizing the full weight of her actions. "I never wanted it to come to this," she said. "I thought I could keep everything separate. But when Clara transferred to Caroline's school, I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. I didn't know what to do, so I just kept pretending everything was fine." John shook his head, struggling to keep his emotions in check. "You've been lying to me, to Tom, and to our daughters. Caroline knew something was wrong, but I didn't listen to her. I thought it was just her imagination, but all this time, she was right." Emily's silence confirmed the truth. John looked at Tom, then back at Emily. "I don't know how we move forward from here," he said, his voice heavy with sadness. "But I know one thing. I can't stay married to you. You've broken my trust, and I can't let Caroline grow up in a house built on lies." Tom, equally heartbroken, nodded in agreement. "We're done, Emily. You've hurt everyone involved in this. Clara will need to know the truth, and we'll have to figure out how to explain this to her." Emily looked crushed, her face pale as she realized she had lost both men she loved and torn 2 families apart.